I remember when the rollout for Prozac. I think it was on the cover of Time or Newsweek or one of the then popular news weeklies in the United States, and it was hailed as a wonder drug that was going to fix America's psychiatric problems. And it didn't. But it was also described as a drug that helped, as I recall, that helped regulate, and I'm quoting, chemical imbalances in the brain. It was not described as something that would numb you.
Yeah, it's essentially just a story that was sold. The chemical imbalance myth was a story that was sold to doctors and patients to make them feel better about taking drugs for their mood. Because I think intuitively, many people, when you say, hey, I'm unhappy, I'm anxious, I'm depressed, if you went to that person and said, hey, do you want to take a drug that's going to mask those symptoms? Intuitively, people would say, no, I'd rather get to the root cause of that. Sweeping things under the rug usually doesn't work that well.
Yes.
But when you craft a narrative about these drugs fixing a chemical imbalance, like a type 1 diabetic who doesn't have enough insulin, you give them insulin and it kind of sort of like a magic bullet kind of injects itself like right into that, pathological process and fixes it. That's kind of a different message. The message to the person is that your brain is defective, there's something wrong with it, and we're going to give you this chemical to bring things up to normal.
Yes.
That's a lot easier for someone to say, well, actually, I need my medicine because I'm broken. But that was essentially a lie. The idea that these drugs, fixed a chemical imbalance simply came from observations that when you give people serotonergic drugs, they can become calmer, they can look less depressed. And so rather than the obvious explanation being, okay, this is a drug effect that we're seeing, they are drugged and that's what we're looking at, people said, oh, well, maybe they just had low serotonin and now they're looking better because we've fixed this chemical imbalance. And so that message has just been grabbed by pharmaceutical industry and, psychiatrists to essentially lull people into this state where they feel more comfortable taking them.
It changed, among other things, the practice of psychiatry completely. And I remember this just because I grew up in an affluent area where people use psychiatrists, not in my family, but everyone else's family. And the idea, it was Freudian psychiatry, and the idea was we are going to treat the root causes. Now, whatever you think of Freudian psychiatry or Freud or whatever, but you'd sit on a couch and talk about your childhood, like that would, by addressing the root cause of your problems, you would make it better. That was the promise of it, whether it worked or not. And then it felt like in one day, right around the time Prozac came out, Freud was being denounced everywhere as a sexist. And Freudian psychiatry became not just sort of passé, but like affirmatively unpopular. And the role of psychiatrists was to dispense these drugs. That, from an outsider's perspective, that's what I noticed at the time.
That is what happened. And I think what was going on was all of a sudden you had $1 billion war chest of marketing spend that was trying to seize control of the narrative about medications. And so, Prozac was like a blockbuster. Some people may not remember this, but that was the drug that made Eli Lilly a $1 billion company. It was a small company before then. And so at every single level, there was an incentive to change how people thought about distress. No longer was depression and anxiety a complex thing where, there could be relationship issues and problems at work and, problems in your childhood. All of that stuff was, now it was almost bigoted in a way to talk about depression and anxiety as if it had these intuitive social and societal causes. It was now a medical condition. And if you were going to say that it wasn't a medical condition, you weren't taking it seriously and you were stigmatizing people. So drug companies, they would platform, I guess through their influence with the universities and
the media,
and the media, they were able to push out this narrative. And so they could shoot down Freudian analysis and therapy. And so the message essentially came out that was, this is a chemical imbalance. These are medical conditions. And if you say anything otherwise, you're stigmatizing the mentally ill.
But it doesn't, That's obviously what happened. I saw it happen, but it doesn't really make internal sense. Like you could say, I think you're depressed because all your relationships are dysfunctional, or your parents are horrible, or whatever, or you're failing at work. Those are all common causes of sadness for sure, without dismissing or stigmatizing the person or his problems. Like, you are taking it seriously. You're just trying to find the actual cause of the problems, right?
We did an interview with a woman called Casey Means. She's a Stanford-educated surgeon and really one of the most remarkable people I have ever met. In the interview, she explained how the food that we eat, produced by huge food companies, Big Food, in conjunction with Pharma, is destroying our health, making this a weak and sick country. The levels of chronic disease are beyond belief. What Casey Means, who we've not stopped thinking about ever since, is the co-founder of a healthcare technology company called Levels. And we are proud to announce today that we are partnering with Levels. And by proud, I mean sincerely proud. Levels is a really interesting company and a great product. It gives you insight into what's going on inside your body, your metabolic health. It helps you understand how the food that you're eating, the things that you're doing every single day are affecting your body in real time. And you don't think about it. You have no idea what you're putting in your mouth, and you have no idea what it's doing to your body. But over time, you feel weak and tired and spacey, and over an even longer period of time, you can get really sick. So it's worth knowing what the food you eat is doing to you. The Levels app works with something called a continuous glucose monitor, a CGM. You can get one as part of the plan, or you can bring your own. It doesn't matter. But the bottom line is, big tech, big pharma, and big food combine together to form an incredibly malevolent force, pumping you full of garbage, unhealthy food with artificial sugars, and hurting you and hurting the entire country. So with Levels, you'll be able to see immediately what all of this is doing to you. You get access to real-time personalized data, and that's a critical step to changing your behavior. Those of us who like Oreos can tell you firsthand. This isn't talking to your doctor at an annual physical, looking backwards about things you did in the past. This is up to the second information on how your body is responding to different foods and activities, the things that give you stress, your sleep, et cetera, et cetera. It's easy to use. It gives you powerful, personalized health data, and then you can make much better choices about how you feel. And over time, it'll have a huge effect. Right now, you can get an additional 2 free months when you go to levels.link/Tucker. That's levels.link/Tucker. This is the beginning of what we hope will be a long and happy partnership with Levels and Dr. Casey Means.
I mean, absolutely. I mean, I think to logical people that makes sense. But the way that played out in in public spaces and in medical schools was that was actually a very backwards and kind of, dismissive thing to, people would say things like, depression just isn't normal sadness. It's a serious biological problem. And so to suggest that, this is just some, life issues going on, relationship issues, you were kind of branded as someone who really, you just didn't get it. You didn't understand the medical underpinnings of this new disease that was gripping the country and kind of evolving and making people suffer.
Did the people making these claims understand the medical basis of this illness they were describing?
No. I mean,
I mean, that's the irony, right? So for example, they say it's a chemical imbalance. Did anyone ever describe what balance is?
So, I mean, this is like a white lie that people sort of rationalize to themselves. Because, people have looked at the chemical imbalance, and there is a clear way to do it. You can look at the brains of depressed people on autopsy, and you can actually, look at receptor levels and say, is there any changes in the receptors? You can stick needles into people's spine, and you can draw out fluid, and you can look at the metabolites of things like serotonin, and you can get depressed people and undepressed people and say, is there any difference in the actual amount of serotonin floating around in the brain? Every time they've done this, they have not found that there is any difference between depressed and undepressed people. But
there's no difference?
There is no difference. Because that's why we don't use any biological markers in the diagnosis of any psychiatric conditions. No brain scans, no blood tests. We can do all of those things. they're not useful because there are no ways, like actual biological ways to differentiate depressed people from undepressed people.
Are you serious?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, so, well, that's not a white lie then. That's like a massive whopper. If you're telling me there's a biological basis for anything, but you can't show it, then you're lying.
Yeah.
Or guessing at best.
And the way they justify it was, well, okay, so we haven't found it yet, but it must be a medical problem and we're eventually going to find it. And rather than admitting that, in the meantime, we'll just tell people it's a chemical imbalance because it's just an easy kind of like metaphor for them to understand, and it helps us dish out the drugs without people asking too many questions.
But it's untrue.
It's untrue.
Therefore, physicians should not say that, or they should lose their medical license.
They shouldn't have been saying it.
But
yeah.
I thought, like strict adherence to reality, honesty, I thought that was like a prerequisite for practicing medicine, getting a license.
Yeah. Well, what's happened in in the space of psychiatry is almost like our field has become so overrun with pharmaceutical propaganda that it's not really an issue of truth in a lot of places. It's like a moral issue. Doctors feel the need to almost encourage people to take these medications and cheerlead them onto it. It has been sort of cast as a issue where it's like, these medications are heavily stigmatized. There's a bunch of like rednecks running around telling people to pull themselves up by their bootstraps. That's like the boogeyman that's cast out there.
Seriously?
Yeah. And so, yeah, that people are like, there's
that there are rednecks out there.
Yeah, there are rednecks out there stigmatizing the mentally ill, saying, your suffering isn't real. And so we need to, kind of peddle this narrative about there being a chemical imbalance and encourage people to take these medications, because mean society out there is telling people to just sit there and suffer in silence and to not take the drugs. And so doctors see it as like almost this is what medical school was like for me in residency. It's like you don't question the drugs, don't question the side effects. You need to encourage people to take them. So it's hinged away from truth, and it has become more of this moral issue. That at least that's how.
Sounds like a religion.
Yeah, that's what decades of drug company propaganda has done to kind of shape the narrative about how doctors and patients in the media view this issue.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. We hope you'll subscribe to it. And by the way, you can hit the little bell on there and get notifications every time we produce a video. We hope you'll do that also.